With only hours left before his emergency heart surgery, his final request wasn't for a priest or his family. It was to see his dog one last time. But what happened in that sterile hospital room would halt the medical team, expose a deadly secret, and prove that sometimes the most loyal hearts beat on four legs. The sterile hum of machines filled the cardiac ward at St. Vincent's Hospital as dawn broke over the city. In the pre-op room, fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Andrew's face, making him look older than his 42 years. He sat hunched in a wheelchair, pale and trembling, his hospital gown hanging loose on a frame that had lost 30 pounds in 3 weeks. Once, he had been the kind of man who ran into burning buildings without hesitation, whose name was spoken with respect in every firehouse across the county. Now, shrapnel damage from a mysterious warehouse explosion had left his heart struggling to beat, each pump weaker than the last. Nurses moved around him with practiced efficiency, checking monitors, adjusting IV lines, their voices low and careful. His vitals had crashed overnight, arrhythmia worsening, blood pressure dropping. Dr. Kellen had been clear: emergency surgery now, or Andrew wouldn't see tomorrow. "We need to prep you for the OR," the head nurse said gently, reaching for his wheelchair. But Andrew didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the door, haunted and distant. "Not until I see Cosmo." The room stilled. Monitors continued their steady beeping, but every human sound stopped. The nurses exchanged confused glances. Not a family member, not a priest, not even a final phone call to loved ones. Just his dog. "Mr. Torres," the nurse began, her tone shifting to practiced professionalism. "Hospital policy doesn't allow—" "Please," Andrew's voice cracked, the word carrying a weight that silenced every objection. "I need to see him. Just once." It was highly irregular. Infection control protocols were absolute. Liability concerns stacked high. But something in Andrew's fragile plea made it impossible to refuse, the unmistakable sound of a man making peace before the end. In that moment, memory flooded back unbidden. The warehouse engulfed in flames, the explosion that threw him 20 feet, the searing pain in his chest as metal tore through muscle. And then, through the smoke and chaos, golden fur, powerful jaws gripping his jacket, dragging him across concrete while his vision faded. The smell of smoke mixed with dog and blood. The sound of sirens growing distant. Cosmo's warm breath against his face, keeping him conscious, keeping him alive. Dr. Kellen appeared in the doorway, surgical mask hanging around his neck, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he studied Andrew, this broken firefighter who had lost everything except a dog. 5 minutes, Dr. Kellen said finally, his voice surprisingly soft. Under strict supervision, in the prep hallway only. Andrew's eyes closed. For the first time in days, something like a smile touched his lips. "He saved my life once," Andrew whispered, so quiet the words almost disappeared into the hum of machines. "Maybe he will again." As orderlies hurried to make the impossible request possible, a strange unease settled over the cardiac ward. Phones were dialed, arrangements made. Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who had been caring for Cosmo, would bring him immediately. Outside, beyond the sterile walls and locked doors, a dog's distant bark echoed through the morning air. Urgent, insistent, as if he already knew something the humans did not. A sound that would soon unravel everything. Mrs. Chen arrived within 20 minutes, breathless and confused, Cosmo's leash wrapped tight around her wrist. The golden retriever pulled her through the hospital corridors with unusual urgency, his nails clicking rapidly against the linoleum, ears pricked forward, nose working overtime. Doctors and nurses paused their morning rounds to watch the unusual sight, a dog navigating the sterile hallways of the cardiac ward, his amber eyes scanning every face, every doorway, searching. When they rounded the corner to the prep area, Cosmo saw him. Andrew's eyes welled up the moment Golden Fur appeared in the doorway. The reunion felt like sunlight piercing clouded glass. Warmth flooding into a space that had been cold and dark for too long. Everything else, the machines, the medicines, the fear, faded into background noise. "Go ahead," the orderly said softly, loosening the leash. Cosmo bounded forward, tail wagging so hard his entire body swayed, whining softly in that way dogs do when they've missed someone desperately. Andrew ignored the shooting pain in his ribs, sliding from the wheelchair to kneel on the cold floor, arms opening wide. 70 pounds of loyal golden retriever crashed into him, nearly knocking him over. But Andrew held on, burying his face into warm fur that smelled like home. "You're here, buddy," Andrew whispered, his voice breaking. "You made it." For those few perfect seconds, the sterile hospital disappeared. No monitors, no surgery, no fear of never waking up. Just man and dog, survivor and savior, two souls who had pulled each other through beer and darkness. Cosmo's tongue found Andrew's face, licking away tears, his tail beating a rhythm of pure joy against the wheelchair. Then something changed. Cosmo went rigid. His ears flattened back against his skull, tail dropping mid-wag. His entire body shifted, muscles tensing beneath golden fur, and he turned his head sharply toward the doorway where Dr. Kellen stood, clipboard in hand, observing the reunion. A low growl rumbled from deep in Cosmo's chest, guttural, primal, unmistakable. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Nurses froze mid-step. Mrs. Chen's hand tightened on the leash. Dr. Kellen took an involuntary step backward, his expression shifting from compassionate observer to something harder, more guarded. "Cosmo, what's wrong?" Andrew's voice carried shock and confusion. His dog had never acted like this. Never. Cosmo was gentle, trained, steady, the kind of retriever who let children climb on him without complaint. But now his hackles rose, a ridge of fur standing up along his spine. His lips curled back, exposing white teeth, and he lunged forward until the leash snapped taut, straining toward Dr. Kellen with singular focus. The growl deepened, becoming a warning that resonated in everyone's chest. Andrew's heart monitor spiked, its beeping accelerating sharply. "Easy, boy," Andrew said, trying to calm him, but Cosmo wouldn't break his stare. His eyes locked on Dr. Ritidon, Kellen like a predator who had found something wrong, something dangerous, something that needed to be driven away. Dr. Kellen forced a laugh, though it came out thin and unconvincing. "Dogs sense fear," he said evenly, adjusting his clipboard with hands that remained perfectly steady. "Medical environments make them nervous. All the strange smells." But his eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat, with something that looked like recognition, or maybe calculation. And Cosmo didn't stop growling. Two orderlies pulled Cosmo from the room, the dog fighting every step, claws scrabbling against linoleum as his growls echoed down the corridor. Andrew watched helplessly from his wheelchair, his chest tight with something more than damaged muscle, a gnawing instinct caught between institutional trust and primal doubt. "I'm so sorry," Mrs. Chen stammered, struggling to control the leash. He's always so gentle." Mara, the nurse who had escorted them in, stood very still near the doorway, her eyes moving between the retreating dog and Dr. Kellen. She had worked in this hospital for 15 years, had seen therapy dogs, service animals, even emotional support peacocks. Animals got nervous in hospitals all the time, but they didn't react like that, not with that kind of focused, singular aggression. "Animals rarely react that way unless they recognize a scent," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "Unless they remember something." The words hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Kellen had already disappeared back toward the operating room, dismissing the incident with professional efficiency, but something about his retreat felt wrong, too quick, too eager to escape scrutiny. Mara moved to the nurse's station, her fingers pulling up the staff directory on the computer screen out of pure instinct. Dr. Marcus Kellen, Chief Cardiac Surgeon. She clicked on his profile. The photo didn't match. Her breath caught. The man in the database had a rounder face, graying temples, a distinct birthmark near his left eye. The man who had just been standing in Andrew's room had sharper features, darker hair, no visible marks. "That's not right," she whispered, clicking through to access logs. Badge scan, 5:47 a.m. Dr. M. Kellen, entering surgical wing, but the real Dr. Kellen's car was still logged in the parking garage. He hadn't even arrived yet. His surgery schedule showed him off-site at a conference until noon. Mara's hand reached for the phone just as Andrew's heart monitor spiked violently. Alarms screaming. Down the hallway, voices rose in sharp urgency. "Security to cardiac wing, now!" Within minutes, the administrative office erupted into controlled chaos. Security footage rolled across multiple screens. The man in surgical scrubs entering through a side door at dawn, using a copied badge, moving through restricted areas with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where cameras had blind spots. The head of security froze the frame, zooming in on the imposter's face as he passed under a hallway light. "Run facial recognition," he ordered. While computers worked, another piece emerged. A detective investigating the warehouse explosion had called that morning with new evidence, accelerant patterns suggesting an insider, someone with access to the building's gas lines. Someone who knew exactly where Andrew would be. Andrew sat motionless in his wheelchair, fragments of memory clicking together like puzzle pieces covered in ash. The warehouse. Those final moments before the blast. He had smelled something out of place. Cologne, expensive and distinct, cutting through the usual sense of diesel and concrete. That same cologne had been in the operating room. His hands gripped the wheelchair arms as realization crashed over him like cold water. Cosmo hadn't been reacting to fear or strange smells. Cosmo had recognized the man who tried to kill them both. The man who was about to cut open Andrew's chest with a scalpel. Down the corridor, the imposter emerged from the surgical prep area, his path taking him past the security desk. He noticed the commotion immediately. Guards speaking urgently into radios, nurses pointing, monitors displaying his frozen image on multiple screens. For one crystalline second, everyone's eyes met. Then he ripped off his surgical mask and bolted. In the waiting area, Cosmo's ears pricked up at the sound of running footsteps. The same footsteps, the same gait, the same man. With a roar that seemed impossible for a golden retriever, Cosmo tore the leash from Mrs. Chen's startled grip and launched himself down the corridor, 70 pounds of loyal fury charging after the man who had tried to murder his best friend. Chaos erupted throughout St. Vincent's Hospital. Hospital alarms screamed through every corridor, their shrill pitch cutting through the usual hum of medical machinery. Security guards pounded down hallways, radios crackling with urgent commands. Medical staff pressed against walls as the chase thundered past, a man in stolen surgical scrubs sprinting toward the emergency exit, and 70 pounds of golden fury closing the distance with every stride. The imposter made it to the supply room corridor before Cosmo caught him. The retriever didn't attack. He positioned himself squarely in front of the exit door, hackles raised, teeth bared, blocking any escape with a snarl that promised violence if the man took one more step. His training as a firehouse dog surfaced. Corner, contain, protect. The growl that rumbled from his chest was the sound of every moment he'd spent watching Andrew suffer. Every night he'd slept beside a hospital bed. Every instinct that screamed, this man was danger. Security arrived seconds later, weapons drawn, surrounding the cornered imposter while Cosmo held his ground. "Don't move," the lead guard commanded. Down the hall, orderlies had wheeled Andrew to safety, but he gripped the armrests of his wheelchair, refusing to leave. his eyes locked on the golden guardian who stood between him and the man who'd tried to end his life. The imposter's shoulders sagged as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. In the harsh fluorescent light, recognition finally came. Marcus Webb, a disgraced paramedic who'd been fired from the city's emergency services 2 years prior. The warehouse explosion investigation had found his fingerprints on modified gas line equipment. He'd triggered the blast to destroy evidence of an insurance fraud scheme, never expecting Andrew to survive. And when the firefighter did, when witnesses started asking questions, Webb had done the unthinkable, stolen credentials, infiltrated the hospital, prepared to silence Andrew permanently under the guise of life-saving surgery. "He was supposed to die in the fire," Webb muttered as they pulled him away. "Just another accident." But Cosmo's instinct, born of trauma and loyalty, forged in flames and blood, had recognized what human eyes could not see. The scent memory of the man who'd been there that night, who'd set the trap, who'd walked away while Andrew burned. The dog had unmasked a killer. 3 days later, the real Dr. Marcus Kellen, the one with graying temples and gentle hands, performed Andrew's surgery in an operating room swept twice for any irregularities. The procedure took 6 hours, damaged tissue repaired, shrapnel fragments removed, a heart given a chance to beat strong again. When Andrew opened his eyes in recovery, the first thing he saw was golden fur. Cosmo's head rested on his knee, the dog asleep but present, as he'd been through everything. The nurses had bent every rule in the book to allow it, whispering among themselves that some bonds transcended protocol. "That dog saved him twice," one murmured, adjusting Andrew's IV. The other nodded, watching the steady rise and fall of both man and dog breathing in sync. "Some hearts just know." 6 weeks later, Andrew walked on his own legs, fragile but alive, scars hidden beneath his shirt, but healing every day. He drove to the edge of town where charred ruins of the warehouse still stood, a memorial to the night that had changed everything. Cosmo walked beside him, leash loose and unnecessary. Andrew knelt in the grass where firefighters had found him, where Cosmo had dragged him from the flames with jaws locked on his jacket collar, refusing to let go even as the building collapsed. He pressed a hand to golden fur, fingers tangling in the soft coat. "You knew, didn't you?" Andrew murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You remembered him. You remembered everything." Cosmo lifted his head, amber eyes steady and calm, reflecting sunlight and something deeper. The unshakable knowledge that his human was safe now, that the threat was gone, that they'd survived together one more time. The breeze carried the faint scent of smoke, or maybe just remembrance, ashes of a past that no longer held power over their future. Andrew smiled, pressing his forehead against Cosmo's, feeling the warmth of loyal breath, the solid reality of a heartbeat that had refused to give up on him. He wasn't afraid of dying anymore, not while the heart that beat next to his, loyal, fierce, and golden, still remembered how to save him.